You are listening to the Heal, Heart and Soul podcast. Our topic today is God specialises in doing the impossible. Are you facing something that looks impossible? Have you looked at all the possible angles and you just can't see a way through? Are you depressed or anxious about your circumstances? For most of us, 2020 has been one of the most challenging years of our lives. Many of us have lost loved ones. We have lost jobs and businesses. We have come to the brink of divorce. Whatever you are facing, it looks impossible. Yet Jesus specialises in doing the impossible. In the Bible, in the book of John, chapter 11, we read the story about where Jesus raises Lazarus from the dead. On the surface, it might just look like a good story, but if you look deeply into what happened, we can gain great encouragement and hope for our own lives. Even when life looks impossible, we can trust Jesus to come through for us. John chapter 11, verse 1. Now a man named Lazarus was sick. So the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one you love is sick. And in verse 4, Jesus says to his followers, this sickness will not end in death. Great! Jesus has given a promise that everything will be okay. But in verse 5 to 7 it says, Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was 2 more days. And then he said to his disciples, Let us go back to Judea. If he loved them, why did he wait 2 more days before going to help? Have you ever been in a desperate situation, and although you believe God has spoken a word of promise to you, it seems like he is doing nothing? We cry out, Where are you, God? You promise in your word to take care of us. We are desperate for your help. And you hear nothing, just silence. You don't even feel like your prayers get any higher than the ceiling. Where is God when you need him the most? But if you keep reading the story, you can see that Jesus delayed coming on purpose. He was planning a much greater miracle than the sisters could ever have imagined. After 2 days, Jesus starts the journey to where Lazarus and his sisters live. By the time he gets there, Lazarus is dead. The situation couldn't get any more impossible, could it? How do you continue to have faith when the situation looks this bad? But this is the time that our faith has to kick into an even higher gear. In the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, verse 1, it says, Faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. Faith is for those times where it doesn't make sense, where there seems no physical way out, where it feels like the situation is beyond help. We are at the end of our strength. Hope has almost been extinguished. Trust God anyway. Back to John 11. After Jesus had said this, he went on to tell them, Our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I am going there to wake him up. His disciples replied, Lord, if he sleeps, he will get better. Jesus had been speaking of his death, but his disciples thought he meant natural sleep. So Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus is dead. And for your sake I am glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. What? Jesus is glad that he was not there. How can a loving God be glad that he was not there just when you needed him the most? The truth is that God always has a greater plan, but we often don't know what that greater plan is. From a human perspective, it looks like God has failed you, but from God's perspective, it is all part of a perfect plan. It is often not until much later on that we are able to look back and see that God was there all the time. In Isaiah 55 verse 8 and 9 it says, "For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. As the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts." Have you ever heard the analogy that life is like a tapestry? We are underneath the tapestry and God is above. From our perspective, underneath the tapestry, all we can see is a big mess with lots of knots and loose threads and definitely no clear pattern. But from God's perspective, it is a perfect pattern, coming together in just the right way. He is still firmly in control. Trust him, no matter what. In John chapter 11, verse 21 and 22, it says, "Lord, Martha said to Jesus, 'If you had been there, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask.'" As we go back to John chapter 11, Martha says, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." Even though in the natural, Martha is heartbroken because she knows that Jesus could have saved her brother but didn't. Yet she still shows that she has some faith left by saying that even now I know God will give you whatever you ask. When Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who had come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he asked. "Come and see, Lord," they replied. And in verse 35 it says, Jesus wept. Remember that Jesus is both fully human and fully God. When he saw the tears and the heartache of his friends, he was moved with compassion and wept for them. Then the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" Have you ever been in a difficult situation and you are holding on to the last shreds of your faith in God and the last shreds of your strength, and someone comes along and says something that almost completely shatters your faith? Perhaps someone who doesn't believe in God, or someone who only has a shallow faith, and they encourage you to give up on God. This is just what happened in the book of Job. While he was in terrible suffering, his wife said to him in Job 2 verse 9, "Are you still holding on to your faith? Curse God and die." But Jesus knew what he was going to do. In John 11 verse 9, Jesus said, "Did I not tell you that if you believe, you will see the glory of God?" In other words, don't give up now. Hold on to your faith in God. Then in John 11:41 and 42, Jesus prays out loud to his heavenly Father and says, "Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know that you always hear me, but I said this for the benefit of the people standing here, that they may believe that you have sent me." And in John 11, verse 43 and 44, Jesus says, "Lazarus, come out." And with these words, Lazarus is brought back to life again. Jesus knew that by waiting until Lazarus was dead and raising him to life, it was a much greater manifestation of God's power than if he had simply healed him from being sick. Remember back in John 11 verse 4, Jesus said the sickness will not end in death. He knew that although Lazarus was actually going to die, the story would not end with his death. Jesus would raise him to life again. When you are going through a hard time, remember this in Romans chapter 8, verse 28, that all things work together for good to them that love God. In other words, no matter what hard things we go through, God promises to bring good out of even the worst circumstances. So trust him. There are 7 life lessons that we can learn from the story of Lazarus. Number 1, God doesn't always do things the way we expect him to. Number 2, no matter how bad a situation looks, God is in control. Number 3, God feels your pain and looks on you with compassion. Number 4, no matter what things look like, keep trusting God. When others try to discourage your faith and trust, do not listen to them. Number 6, you may not understand right now, but you will understand later. And number 7, God takes bad situations and brings good out of them for the people who love him.